Aloha, y'all. Daniel Aaron here, your guide to vibrant living. Few people know this about me, so I'm excited to share this little bit with you, and I'm excited to bring it to you from this view. I know I'm a little bit less lit than the background. That's the ocean, though. That is, if you're on the mainland U.S., you're over there 2,000 miles away. That's my daily reminder that it's a big world, that consciousness is ever expansive, that whatever we can dream, we can create. As Napoleon Hill said, if you can conceive it, you can achieve it. Now, early experience for me in this, I didn't know anything about spirituality, I didn't know anything about the law of attraction, yoga, I had not had a spiritual awakening. So what happened though, is somehow in my bones I knew it, and guess what? You do too. You know that the law of attraction is real. You know that spirit is real. Why? Because it's intuitive, because it's your nature, because you've had tastes at the least of it in your life, synchronicities. In any case, I was really into, like the main thing I wanted at that point in my life was to write. So I was getting all of my free time as much as possible protected so that I could write. Right? I didn't have a full-time job. I was doing childcare. I was shoveling snow. I was in Western Massachusetts. I was writing every day. I was taking writing workshops. I was obsessed with it. And one day, I was in Amherst, Massachusetts, went into the bookstore there. Ooh, I almost remember the name of it. Now it's called Atticus or something like that. It's on the corner, right in the middle of Main Street of Amherst. Beautiful bookstore, really nice. You know, big glass windows, and I just love books, right? And it was such a great place, and I had no money, right? I think that came clear. I was like, so just barely, man. My rent was like $300 a month, right? And that was a stretch, and I was, spending very little so that I could have my time for writing. So I go into the bookstore, which I did periodically, and they were really sweet about it there. It's a college town. They're used to young folks without much money. So I would go in there and I would sit on the floor, as many of us did, and read books. So one day, I was in there, and I was reading the Writer's Manual. What's it called? Guide to Writing, Publisher's Guide. I forget the exact name of it. But it was like, it was the Bible for publishing, at least at that point. And I was reading through, there's a back section that was interviews, wonderful stuff. And I read this, like, really inspiring interview. And I was just like, wow, awesome. And I had never heard of the guy. His name was John Edgar Wideman. And then I got to the end, and I looked through, it gives his bio, and it says that he teaches in the Masters of Fine Arts writing program at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, Massachusetts, literally like a mile from where I was sitting in the bookstore. So it just came to me in that moment, like, hey, why not? I'm going to go study with him. I mean, he's obviously an amazing writer and teacher, so I want to take his class. I just made the decision, I want to do that. I didn't know how I was going to do that or what it would take, how that works. So what I did is went to the university. A couple days later, I go to the university, walk into the graduate English department, and I go up to the desk, and I learned that outside students can take classes, or outside community members. I wasn't enrolled in the university, right? I was beyond my university degree at that point. And so I went up to the desk, and the secretary came over, and I said, hi, I would like to enroll for Dr. Wideman's class. It was starting like 2 weeks from then, and it was a workshop for fiction writers, and that's what I was working on a lot in my life at that point. I was writing short stories. And she looked at me, a little bit of puzzlement, like obviously not a common question she gets. And so she says, well, are you a student here? I said, no, not. And at this point, I'm starting to feel really insecure, feeling like I'm the kid from the other side of the tracks, right? And in my fantasy, this wasn't actually reality, but you know how we create stories. My fantasy, unresourceful, limiting belief is this is a place full of rich kids, and here I am, barely getting by and poor, and so I'm starting to feel a little worried and contracted and fearful, so then a little testy. And she says, oh, okay, well, so you're not enrolled in the university, Do you have some kind of permission to take the class? And now I'm getting a little indignant. I'm like, no, I just would like to take the class. She says, oh, okay. And she said, well, so the procedure is you can go to the first class, and she tells me the date, it's 2 weeks later, bring a sample of your writing, and if Dr. Weidman reads it and accepts you to the class, then you come back to enroll. And I don't know how she did it, or if I did it in my own head, but it was abundantly clear that the chances were about 0.01% that I would be accepted. All right, there we go. Lights blew over. Hopefully you can still see me and hear me. And so nonetheless, I was determined. And I left the office and I went back home I was living in a shared house and worked on a story, worked on it more, went to the first class. I kid you not, this is how nervous I was, how much lack of confidence I had in that moment. I was like nervous to find a place to park at the university. I found it, how much time and where's it, and I was walking across there and it was just a nightmare. And I'm trying to find the place, and finally I find the right building, find the right room. And guess what? By this point, I was actually late, like 5 minutes late, even though I thought I was going to be half an hour early. Feeling like a total outsider, so I get there late, look in, there's like this little glass window, I look in, I see Dr. Weidman, who was a black-skinned guy, 6'4" or 5", used to be a collegiate basketball player, imposing physical specimen, and not just physically, he's got a presence about him. So he's at the front of the room. There's maybe 10 students there in the class, presumably all MBA students, MFA students, Masters of Fine Arts. And so they're all sitting around, he's in there, and so what to do? I have no choice. So I open the door and I walk in, and he looks over at me. No kidding, literally in this moment, he gestures for me to sit down, and he says, as I was saying, I will be on time for class, and I expect you to be on time for class. And I'm like, what a moment to enter. So I, smirk, sleek, strong. What's that word? Anyway, I scrunk. Anyway, I slink. There it is. I slink over to a seat, sit down, try and hide. Goes through the whole class. Okay. End of the class comes. They all leave. They all know each other. I feel like an outsider. Did I mention that part? So I get out my manuscript, walk up to the front of the class, and I say, Dr. Weidman, and I should say, Dr. Weidman, because he's so much taller than me. And so I explain the situation, and by now I'm super defensive, so on the attack I say, and the secretary told me that I give you this, and if you deem that I am worthy for the class, then you might admit me to the class. And he looked down at me very kindly. He's like, well, not sure it's so severe as all that, but yes, it'd be good if I can see your writing. Okay. So I leave. He says, come back next week either way and we'll talk about it. So, okay. So I come back a week later. You can imagine how nervous I am. Is he going to accept me? What's going to happen? This time I get there on time. Still feeling like a total outsider though. He goes through the whole class. I'm on pins and needles the whole time wondering, is this my last class? Anyway, at the end of the class, again, they all leave. I go back up front and he says, well, I read your story. Thank you so much. I see in there that there's some good elements to there. There's some issues. We can talk about that. Let me ask you a question. Do you need to have credit for this class? So, he means like university credit. So I thought about it, and I was like, well, I hadn't thought about that. I don't know if I need credit. I guess not. I don't know. And meanwhile, important piece to note, by the way, when I was sitting in the bookstore, when I read his article, I said, I'm going to take his class. I also knew, well, one, I didn't know the price of the class. It's an expensive university. I did know that I had next to no money, right? I was just barely able to pay my $300 rent. And when I learned about how much the class cost, I was actually shocked at how low it was. It was like $1,200 for a 3-credit class for a semester, which seemed to me Like, wow, that's not very much considering, these kids are paying like $20,000 a year or something. Nonetheless, $1,200 seemed like a fortune to me. I had no idea how I could get it. I did know, and this is the miracle to me. I knew intuitively I knew intuitively. My mother used to say this all the time. There was a little, another magnet on the refrigerator in our house. Where there's a will, there's a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. Like I had that drilled into my head. So I just knew somehow that if I said, I'm gonna do it, then I would find a way. Still, at this point, I had no idea how I was gonna get the money. So, Dr. Weidman says to me, well, because if you don't need the credit, if your real motivation for being here is you want to become a better writer, it would be a lot easier for me if you didn't register, and then I don't have to deal with all the paperwork of it. So one, I realized in that moment, he was going to let me in. Two, I didn't realize it immediately, it dawned on me later. That means I don't have to pay for it. I was so excited about that later when I realized that part. In any case, the result was he let me into the class, and he said, you come and participate just like all the other students. We're going to workshop your stories. You're going to be part of the workshopping of other stories. And y'all, it was a massively transformative semester for me, right? I had to overcome so many insecurities. My first time when I workshopped the story, I got bombarded with criticism, right? Whether it was accurate, and a lot of it was, or whether it was some form of hazing, some of that was there too. I left the class that day, started walking across campus. I remember it was a snowy day, and I had the thought go through my head, who are you kidding, man? You can't write, you're not a writer. So lucky though, because I had other influences and other teachers, and I realized within moments before I even got to my car, bullshit, that is not reality. And I overcame that, and I learned a lot, and Dr. Weidman was a great friend to me, and teacher and mentor. And even bigger lesson really though, of course, is the truth of it. Where there is a will, there is a way. So, I will leave it there, y'all. That's a little story that not so many folks know about me. I am curious for you. What is something that you want, would love to create or experience, yet don't know how you could do it? Right? And if you knew that it was possible, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you start? Comment. I would love it. I will respond. I appreciate you tuning in. If this is useful, maybe entertaining, innocuous, please like, share, subscribe. Let's help get more vibrant beings in the world. Thanks, y'all. Live with aloha.